So welcome everyone. I'm Wendy Carr and I'm a member in the BC School Centre Mental Health Coalition and a faculty member at UBC, Faculty of Education. We're going to be introducing the team today in a moment, but first, if we could go to the next slide, please. We would like to acknowledge that we live and work on the traditional unceded lands of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish nations. But let us also acknowledge the traditional territories on which others here today work, live, and play. And as we recognize these lands and the people's histories and natural worlds that they represent, let us take a stand for learning, understanding, and caring, especially at this time. And today is actually a chance to do that. The next slide, please. So the BC School-Centered Mental Health Coalition's first webinar is Anchoring Resilience, and we will be underway very shortly. And we're really pleased that you could join us today. And we are looking forward to the conversations that we'll be having during the next hour. First, a brief introduction, and then our guest facilitator will present today's topic. So the coalition was established in 2010, and it comprises members from over 70 organizations representing the BC school system, government ministries, and non-government organizations, service providers, research agencies and institutions, advocacy groups, and professional associations. And it exists to advance and support the vision of BC schools as safe and caring learning environments that foster the mental well-being of their communities. With this vision in mind, the Coalition's Volunteer Steering Committee has organized the first of a series of webinars designed to engage dialogue among its member groups so that they can, in turn, support well-being in their contexts. These webinars were designed to provide a short overview of the topics, but then there will be an opportunity for discussion and sharing of ideas. And with such a short timeline, we're hoping that this is just a beginning of the conversation and that actions and ideas will come from these rich conversations. The next slide, please. So it takes a team, and this fine group of coalition volunteers put their minds together to organize today's webinar. And in 2 weeks' time, you'll have the opportunity to participate in the next webinar on staff well-being with a different group of coalition members, as well as some of the same here. Next one. Before we begin, please note the following shared understandings for participation in these webinars. And the next one. And please review the following points about using Zoom. We've all been meeting virtually using Zoom, Teams, and other software. This will be a visual presentation today, so if you are joining by phone only, you will only be able to hear the presentation and take part in the group discussions. However, for everyone, please note that Connie's introduction and discussion guide questions will be archived and posted on the Coalition website. And we're hoping this will be a starter for conversations that you may wish to hold with your teams in your various contexts. Next slide. Without further ado, I introduce to you Connie Easton. Connie is a consultant for mental health and social emotional learning for the Richmond School District. She supports teachers and staff in creating programs for mental health literacy and social emotional learning, curriculum integration, and working with community agencies and health region partners to support staff and students around mental health and substance use education. And I'm delighted to have the chance to work with Connie and have worked with her on a number of occasions in professional development and working with her in the coalition. So it's over to Connie, and I think we'll move on to Connie's first slide. And just a bit of a shape of the day after Connie's introduction to the topic and outlining of guiding questions, there will be breakout opportunity for discussion, and then we will come back together as a whole group to share some insights together. Over to Connie.
Thank you, Wendy. Welcome everyone and good morning. Take a look at the photo on the screen and place yourself in a boat on that stormy sea. How do you feel? Panicked? Afraid? Perhaps overwhelmed? Probably all of those things. Even the best swimmer among us would find this situation a challenge. How about resilient? Not likely unless you are past the crisis. However, we need to be resilient now, not when this crisis is over. At first glance, the term anchoring resilience may look like a contradiction. When we think of an anchor, we often think of something that holds us down. But an anchor also holds us safely in place in stormy seas. Any of you who are boaters or lifeguards know that when we capsize, our instinct is to panic and to flail, to resist what is happening to us. However, we also know that if we are able to calm ourselves in that moment and take time to think, we can survive by doing the things we need to do to stay safe. This ability to adapt is resilience. In the turbulent times we are dealing with today, it is more important than ever to be able to be calm and model that calm by reframing our response to what can seem daunting at best and life-threatening in the worst moments. In other words, to be resilient, to adapt and change. Next slide. Roughly 10 weeks ago, life as we knew it turned upside down. On March 23rd, the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence and the Collaborative for Academic and Social and Emotional Learning, CASEL, conducted a survey of more than 5,000 people worldwide. Participants were asked to describe how they were feeling in their own words. More than 95% of the responses reflected unpleasant feelings. The top 5 were anxious, fearful, worried, overwhelmed, and sad. Only about 6% of the sample mentioned positive feelings like hopeful and grateful. Many people reported feeling lost and rudderless in this new normal world. Next slide. But what is this new normal? We all agree that we've moved from our usual exits on the highway of life to these unexpected turns in the road. Before COVID-19, 5% of Canadians reported high to extreme levels of anxiety. 5 weeks later, that number has multiplied to a reported 20%. Self-reported cases of depression have more than doubled, from 4% to 10%, according to surveys done by Mental Health Canada. In hearing this, we could assume that Canada is facing a mental health crisis due to the pandemic and related events. But what if we reframe this narrative? Have another look at the words on these exit signs. Stressed, anxious, worried. These words describe normal responses to an unsettling event that has turned our reality upside down. Words matter, and how we frame our experiences matters too. Where this road is taking us is in our hands. How we move forward is to talk about what is happening to ourselves, to others, and to our communities. Next slide. Reframing our feelings and fears is also critical to this process. This allows us to change the narrative for others. While this crisis has already changed us individually, it has also uncovered some of the greatest fragilities and strengths in our systems. Take a look at this diagram. We are all on this spectrum somewhere from fear to growth on a regular basis, sometimes several times a day. Recognizing that we have a choice about how we respond to this crisis and how we model that response to those around us can give us the power to change our experience and that of others. This is nothing new. Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, is based on the premise that by reframing our experiences, we can respond to them differently. COVID-19 has amplified our fears and threatened to take away our resilience. But if we move to the growth zone, by acknowledging our feelings, we can arrive at growth and change. And although it starts with us, we can't do it alone. How can we reframe our natural reactions of fear and turn them into gratitude? Next slide. Focusing on gratitude in the middle of a pandemic may seem counterintuitive, but it highlights the power of reframing. We see what we look for. When you are looking for things to be grateful for, you don't have to find anything, but chances are that you will. It's the searching that counts, says UCLA neuroscientist Alex Korb. Remembering to be grateful is a form of emotional intelligence. One study found that it actually affected neuron density in both the ventromedial and lateral prefrontal cortex. These density changes in the brain suggest that as emotional intelligence increases, the neurons in these areas become more efficient. With higher emotional intelligence, it simply takes less effort to be grateful. It's not finding gratitude that matters most, it's remembering to look in the first place. How do we do this? The 5 pillars of social emotional learning can help us map our journey. Beginning with the self, we take care of ourselves through self-awareness and self-management. A dysregulated adult cannot regulate or co-regulate a student, much like a dysregulated leader cannot effectively co-regulate and lead their community. We create and maintain connection with others by building relationships and tap into our social awareness when we think about how our actions and choices impact others. We arrive at the growth zone through collective action in our communities, making responsible decisions that result in changes to the systems we move within. Yale University's Mark Brackett reminds us that reframing is the art of putting things in perspective. For example, reminding ourselves that our elders experienced wars, depression, and pandemics can motivate us to rise to the challenge. Or when we feel the urge to violate social distancing guidelines, we can call on our better selves to be accountable for our role in containing or spreading the disease. We can recast the unexpected time with loved ones as an opportunity to get to know each other better. And we can remind ourselves that this is not forever. Some semblance of normal life will resume. We just don't know what it will look like yet. As we begin to move to a place of recovery in the months ahead, we have the ability to disrupt our old patterns and begin to collectively explore tools and approaches that enhance how we work to affect change. Many of you may recognize the castle wheel in this description of moving from the self to others to community. The same practices apply to all of us as we create a circle of care, which begins and ends with us. Where do we start? We may not be able to go outside, but we can go inside. Looking at Susan David's emotional pyramid, we see that we need to begin with acceptance. Move to compassion for self and others. Create routine and foster connection. Recognizing the powerful emotions that you may be experiencing and having this echoed by others in your circle who are struggling with many of the same things is both affirming and empowering. This is why we need to have courage to feel our feelings, acknowledging them, but keeping them in perspective. We know from Stan Kucher's work that the language we use with ourselves and with others matters and creates our perceptions when we talk about mental health. Mental health literacy tells us that when we can sit with uncomfortable feelings and events and find healthy ways to cope, we grow resilient. Next slide. As we move from the self to the circle of connection and collaboration with others, we can begin to explore some of the ways we can support those around us. Supporting others to give themselves permission to make choices and take actions that move them from fear to growth is one way to build a more resilient community. We know from the work of Kim Schonert-Reichel at the University of British Columbia that educator social emotional learning and student SEL are connected and often mirror each other. That means that being able to tap into your own self-awareness and self-regulation is the first step in anchoring resilience for our students, children, and families. With this in mind, when we return to life as we knew it, does it have to be the same? Or can we begin to ask questions that will shape the way we do our work differently? As we move from the inner circle of self through our connections with others, we can begin to look at our reality in a different way. This reframing approach that you see on the screen can help us address any number of common challenges, both in and out of the classroom. In this graphic, Harvard University speaker and author, Thomas Waddell Wettlesberg, considers the implications for many problems and offers a strategy to think about reframing them. The way we see the problem can prevent us from creating more effective solutions. He uses an example of a group who kept complaining about a slow elevator in their building. The problem would seem to be the speed of the elevator, and at first glance, we would naturally go there. But if we shift this to the experience of waiting for the elevator, a new problem emerges. The problem was solved by putting up mirrors beside the elevators, as people spent their waiting time looking at themselves and stopped complaining since they were now occupied. This reframing model allows us to explore the nuances of the problems and challenges we are facing, allowing us to reframe them as opportunities. In a few moments, you will be going into breakout rooms to consider some questions related to the 3 circles of care we've been talking about: self, others, and community. Let's position the first question in this model to anchor your discussions. How am I caring for myself? This challenge can be reframed by thinking about it in a different way. For example, if we ask, how am I not taking care of myself? We are having a completely different conversation, one that takes us deeper into a dialogue about self-care, where we are focused on different ways of achieving that goal. We may then rethink our goals, look to others for ideas, inspiration, and support, and look in the mirror to be accountable to ourselves. This allows us to take a different perspective than the one we began with. Finally, we can move forward with a plan and ask the question, how do we keep this change going? So those 3 questions that you see on the screen will be the questions that will frame your discussion as you move into your breakout rooms. Next slide. How we frame our experience of this pandemic is up to us. Reflected in the words of Sonia Renee Taylor is an opportunity to rise to the challenge of creating different structures that support learning and relationship together. Let's explore the challenges we face head-on by anchoring our resilience to our resolve to do things differently for ourselves, our communities, and the people we support in our circle of care. Thank you.
Thanks so much. That's wonderful, Connie, and really appreciate your perspectives and how we can flip. Sometimes it sounds a little too easy to talk about finding opportunity. We've been hearing that a lot, but I think you've given us a lot of framing language to think about how to really flip reaction to actually building resilience. So the 3 questions, I think, Gail, you're going to put those in the chat. Sorry, I started doing that and then had to respond to something. So we'll have the 3 questions in the chat area, just to remind you. And when we break into our groups, Gail's going to do that, so you'll automatically go into a group. I think we'll have about 20 minutes, Gail. Does that seem about right? About 20 minutes.
Yeah,
and
that sounds about right.
Yeah, thanks. We'll ask one person in each group to just take a few notes, key insights. There are 3 questions. So are there some points that rise to the surface, because we would like to share this out with the group together in this space, but also afterwards in a follow-up. So if one person could take that role, we're all educators and we've all done this, so I'm sure that'll be fine. And then we'll come back together in 20 minutes and we'll share some big picture insights together.
That sounds good. Just a reminder that if you have your camera off, that when we're going to put you into breakout rooms, it would be nice to have your camera on at this point. Yeah, that would be great.
And for the recorder in each group, perhaps they could put their comments in the Zoom chat so everyone could see them later.
Wonderful. Yeah, that would be great.
I'm going to be asking you to do that. Yes, thanks, Kim. Super.
Right.
So if there are any technical difficulties in this little transfer over to breakout, please use the chat to communicate to Gail, who is our mistress behind the curtain, who's going to make this all happen for us.
All right, off we go.
It's so great to have folks from all across the province. We could take a moment to fire in a bunch of school districts, but in the chat, but we have the list, and there are folks from all across the province, as well as from the ministry, from some independent schools, different organizations. So that's been wonderful, really rich conversations. And by the way, happy Mental Health Week. That was part of today was to be the third annual Ministry of Education School Community Mental Health Conference. So we were already planning to be together today. So this has turned out to be a really great way to share some good thoughts. So maybe we'll just do our best here to manage perhaps writing in just a few key ideas that came out of groups, just a few, like not all your notes, but just a few that we could just quickly scan in the chat box. So if you want to, maybe let's just for question 1, how do I care for myself? Maybe just a few of your favorite ideas that you want to just share in the chat, and we'll just read them. Just question 1. This is like speed reading in the 70s. Just here we go. Yeah.
Maybe Wendy, even if we can someone could talk about it too, just briefly unmute themselves and
yeah, feel free. We'll try this. We'll see if it does not everybody talking over each other, but if someone wants to say, Paula, you're speaking and we can't hear a word. Or maybe she was speaking to someone else.
I was, sorry. I was just talking about things that bring me joy.
Well, that's a good thing too.
It's Dave here. I'll just contribute to the one of the self piece from the self conversation, and that was around exercise and connecting with family and friends. But what was a theme was that people are doing it regularly. A question that I didn't get to ask my group, but I would be curious, and not the form to ask it, but people seem to acknowledge that regularly was important. I'm wondering how different it is now, how much it seemed to be a priority for people. I wonder if it was the same kind of priority before the pandemic, or if somehow that life got busy enough that it became less a priority. And what will it look like after the pandemic, after life returns to whatever normal is, post-pandemic? Will people still be able to find time to exercise regularly and connect regularly with family and friends?
I'm going to move. Thanks, Dave. I'm going to ask people to put up a few ideas that came from their groups for question 2. How am I maintaining connection with others?
I can just share a few things, Wendy.
Please.
We were talking in our circle about the idea in our district, our learning services team actually meets virtually, And we have now begun to do a First Nations circle protocol once a week. And it's been so powerful for us as a team to step outside our role and really connect in our humanity, that we've decided to make that a part of our regular way of being as a team, to do that regularly. So that's one way that we've been connecting. And Suzanne actually brought up a great point in our group about rituals and how important they are, and how we've been, as a society, finding new ways to develop rituals. You know, we have the 7 o'clock cheer every night with the pots and pans. We've got takeout night in many of our families, one night a week. And so, you know, rituals, it's an acknowledgement how important those are, and also that we are creatively finding new ways to honor them. So that was good.
Thank you. Virtual happy hours, etc. So we've got lots of ideas coming, and folks will be doing a little compilation, not verbatim all of the notes, but just some key ideas as a bit of follow-up for you. Let's just take a moment to look at groups who were able to get to how am I supporting communities. If we could just put a few ideas. Richard, do you want to just share what you did about the United Way?
Yes, for those that are especially in the Lower Mainland, the United Way put out an ask earlier in the week, and they have some funding to help around food security and other things for vulnerable youth. And there's not much paperwork. It's a one-pager to apply. I don't know if they still have it. I think they're coming out with the announcement on what they're doing, and it's for 2 months, May and June. And they told me that, or my contact, and keep it in the bubble here, this all over the province, that it doesn't necessarily have to be spent all by the end of June, because we're really concerned about what's going to happen in the summer.
Yeah.
So when we talk about what September might look like, I'm really concerned about our vulnerable families, hourly employees that might not have work in the summer.
Thanks, Richard. And maybe on that note, some gems that anyone in the webinar would like to share that they know would be of help to those of us, all of us who are trying to support others.
Right, it's Cindy, excuse me, here with Sioux School District, and we're working a lot with a whole bunch of community partners, recognizing, like always, schools can't do it alone. So putting together a plan across the community related to food security, but then other needs of families, and thinking about those summer months at this stage, trying to have a plan in place before we get into mid to late June. And I just wanted to mention, Wendy, another comment from our great team was, you know, that as much as it's a pretty stressful time right now, that the kinds of changes that we're living through are breeding more connection and more intentionality around really reaching out and getting to know families even maybe better than they've known them before, because the fact is we're joining them in their homes, right? So, and, you know, I used an example of, I'm a Maritimer, so I say hello to everybody anyway, but I purposely, you know, extending a hello and a friendly smile, because nothing like that to help drop the stress level a little bit, I think. And so, yeah.
That's great. And actually on that note, Cindy, and cognizant of people's time, you know, you're part of a community here, everyone, and we encourage you to visit the BC School-Centered Mental Health Coalition website, attend the next webinar in 2 weeks. We will be sending out a very short poll, 3 questions, for a little bit of feedback about this, and suggestions for other webinars that we might do. Do you want more front ending? Do you want more discussion? Whatever it might be, we want to keep them short and meaningful. So that poll will be coming out very shortly, and we can post, we will be posting a recording of the intro and Connie's slides, part of that intro, and the guiding questions on the coalition website. So if there are any other final words, I'd like to thank Connie Easton from Richmond School District very much. So we can give her, you can go down to your reactions and get your little clapping icon, or we can do this as well. And thanks to all of you for being here. As someone said in the list, Gail, I think it was you, just seeing everyone here is really uplifting. So thank you for that. And good luck with your efforts. Stay well.